You know that feeling when you wake up one morning and realize the day ahead of you is empty. The kids are gone, the job is changing, even your relationships feel different. And suddenly, all those routines that used to fill your time, they're just not there anymore. Here's what nobody talks about. When the things in your life change, it's not just the loss that hurts, it's the collapse of your daily structure. Today, we're talking about what happens when your daily routine falls apart in midlife and how to create a new one that brings you back to yourself. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get more real insights. Laurie Smith is a trusted voice on creativity and flow. She's a keynote speaker, author, and storyteller who helps people reconnect with what lights them up when life feels overwhelming. In her new book, The Flow Habit, she shows how spending just 5 to 10 minutes a day on something you love can rebuild your sense of purpose when everything else has fallen apart. Hi, Laurie. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, I've got your book right here, The Flow Habit, and I have to say, I was so excited to talk to you because the very first line of your book is, have you ever felt stuck? And I just have to say that you don't know how many women in my community use that exact word to describe midlife. And I just love to know, when you started writing this book, what made you open with that question?
You know, the very reason the book exists is because I had one of those moments of feeling stuck. And honestly, if there's any message that I want to offer your viewers and listeners, it's that, there is a way to move through it. And that's connecting with our own unique spark. And that is exactly what happened to me and why I am just so passionate about spreading the word about flow and what led me to write this book. Because I think as women, I think a lot of times we're used to viewing being stuck as something is wrong, or we've done something wrong, or there's something out there that we need to look to help us get unstuck. And I wanted to begin with that because it's like, hey, we've all felt stuck, and I think the key to starting to get unstuck is to normalize it and be like, hey, we all know that feeling. We've all had that feeling at some point in our lives. This is what it means to be human, is to have moments of feeling stuck. I have had that feeling many times. Sometimes many times in a day, depending on whether my sugar is crashing or how much coffee I've had. But also across my life, I can point to several times when I've just had that feeling of just things aren't going right. I'm not living the life that I wanted to live. Don't feel like I'm contributing in the way that I want to contribute, or I don't feel seen, or I don't feel that sparkly energy that I know I've had at other times in my life. And what can I do to make a change? The moment that I had that led to this writing of this book happened as I was going through menopause at midlife. And it was one of those times where, for lots of different personal events had happened in my life, where I was in that place again. And it happened to coincide with the start of the pandemic, those early days of the lockdown. So there was a lot of feeling stuck and anxiety in the air for other reasons too, as so often happens, right? So often, we're not in a vacuum. Our stuckness often might coincide with the death of someone we care about, or, caretaking, whether it's caring for our kids, or experiencing loss as we go through empty nesting, or caretaking for elderly parents, or whatever it is. We live in this ecosystem, right? And all of that can contribute to our inner feelings of feeling stuck. So that's how it all began.
You talked about in the book feeling stretched too thin, and that like you were losing connection. Did you recognize, were there signs where you thought to yourself, ooh, something's got to change?
For me, the biggest sign was in those early days of the lockdown when my kids were coming to me with questions. As many of us were getting those emails, things are closing. And I remember specifically one of my kids was asking me about a sleepover that was planned that night. And can I go? And it was like everything was shutting down. And I recognized in that moment that we're all stretched and we all do our best at all situations. But I also noticed it was hard for me to show up for my kids in that grounding, calm way that I wanted to and that I knew was possible and that I had at other times in my life. And that to me was a real signal that something was off and that I had lost that connection with my best self. And so what I did, which I know because you read the book, you know what happened, but what I did was I challenged myself to do something every day that had a high chance of getting me into flow. And flow is that feeling we get when we're so into what we're doing that we lose track of time. I had that feeling many times, witnessed my kids in that state of flow, just pure being absorbed in playing. And for me, what often did that was writing. I love to write. I've always loved to write. When I was little, I loved to write stories. And although I had been teaching at that time and doing some really interesting work, I hadn't been writing. And I hadn't connected with that sparkle that I felt when I was just lost in pure creation and creating something. And so I just challenged myself. I said, you know what? I'm going to just, for 5 to 10 minutes a day, here we are. I don't have to do that early morning hustle to get the kids out to school. I'm going to just write, and I'm going to give myself permission to do it, not because it'll make me better, not because it'll help me, although it did ultimately help me, led to writing 2 books. That was not the intention or the goal or not what I was setting out to do. You know, it was just the sheer joy of it, to get back to that feeling of what it felt like for me to write. And I think this is a key point because in my work, I meet again and again women that express how hard it is to give ourselves permission to just do something for fun, to take 5 minutes out of my day. I was kind of embarrassed, to be honest, that it was so hard for me to do this. And it felt kind of silly that I had to challenge myself to do something joyful to get that part of me back. And so I didn't even tell my kids. I didn't tell my husband I was doing this. This was just something private I did for myself. And I wasn't that consistent. Sometimes I did it in the morning. Sometimes I forgot. And right before I'd go to bed at night, I'd write. But slowly, I started to feel so much better. So much that I started telling other creative friends. And I said, do what brings you joy. Do what gets you into flow. Choose your own activity. For me, it was writing, but for you, it might be something else. Choose your own thing. And soon it started to spread. I have a friend that was doing little watercolor paintings on index cards, another that was sketching in nature. My mother in her 80s was taking a sunrise walk every morning, and she kept doing that even through the snow. And for more than a year, she kept doing it because it's just a way of taking our power back, but also it's rooted in science. And what I found is that it's contagious. So not only did my joy of getting back into flow spread to my friends and my family and my clients and my community, but it has a way of spreading through our lives, this energy, if we can just get it back. And I think the key point is I often call myself a recovering perfectionist. And I think we can be really hard on ourselves, right? And really, there's so many messages out there that our value is based on how we appear or what we achieve or all this external noise, right? And the key is that we take our power back by separating from that and focusing on joy and focusing on how we're feeling and not thinking about it and analyzing it, but just being present with whatever we're doing. And that's how we take our power back. And that's what the science shows is actually happening in our brain during flow. The part of our brains that control us versus them, worrying about what other people think, that inner critic, that part even that sees us as separate, goes offline when we're in flow. And so the best thing we can do is just try to find creative ways to disengage from that, because that's how we can enter into this beautiful space and change our lives a few minutes a day with what brings us joy and what helps us get into flow.
And I'm so happy that you brought the point of giving ourselves permission, because that does feel a part of the being stuck problem, is because we're looking for that permission, but it's really something we have to give ourselves.
Yeah, and that, to be honest, is why I did so much research into the benefits and how this works, because I know it helps when we know that this is really good for our well-being, that's really good for our health. It's like that external reason to do it. But yet, it's like a few minutes a day helps us take our power back and helps us connect with that part of ourselves. And it's also, that's what the science shows us as far as how habits are formed in our brains. But even more so, I think, as I was doing this, I think the real magic, well, I call these my 28-day flow challenges. And I think the real magic is that I stumbled into it in a way. Like I wasn't seeking to do anything other than just get my mojo back in a way that worked for me based on, I had been a coach and done lots of work in the wellness area for decades. So I was well versed in flow, but I wasn't coming at it from the perspective of like what will work. And as a result, I think we kind of stumbled accidentally in what really does work. And one of those things is what I call the flow mindset. And so as I was leading these 28-day flow challenges, I started because I was writing every day, and I was a coach, and I loved to lead groups. I was writing an email a day. And in those emails, and then I started leading Zoom calls, and I constantly repeated, because it's what I needed to hear, over and over and over again. There's no right or wrong way to do this. If you skip a day, don't worry about it. Just get back in the game. Experiment. If you choose writing and it's not going well and it's just not bringing you joy, it's okay. Pivot. This is fun. We're just friends, experimenting, learning, sharing stories, having fun. It was like that playful, let's get back to the way we used to live when we were kids, when we were just playing. And that accidentally is what helps us access flow, right? And so many people gave me feedback that was the most helpful. They needed that permission to not do it right. And they needed that permission to not beat themselves up if they didn't do it as consistently as they wanted to. And the reality is that is actually the secret. Because the more we can soften and be playful and not hard on ourselves as we do this, then we're in this curious mindset where we're just learning about ourselves and like, wow, I wonder what'll happen if I show up and just paint 5 minutes a day. And wow, I'm starting to listen to my intuition. And gosh, that inner child in me is bored of painting and doesn't want to paint anymore. She wants to go look at flowers. And that's as much the medicine as the actual act of doing it 5 minutes a day. It's the way in which we approach it playfully and with experimenting. And there is also something really, really powerful about doing it in community, which is why in my book I share stories from all of these people that have been doing this, because I wanted to give the reader this idea that they were in this community, and that they're hearing stories, and this kind of like we're all in this together and we're just learning together.
That's one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk with you about this is that sense of community. And when you're with a group of women who are going through the same things and feeling the same things. In midlife, we go through so many transitions, right? And you mentioned a few of them when we first started talking. We have the empty nest, and we lose a parent, or our relationships change. And it just feels like the structure of our lives sort of collapses. We have all of these routines that we do on a daily basis, and all of a sudden we find ourselves without the routine.
Yes.
And when I read your book, I just thought to myself, there must be a way that this flow habit can help women shape their day again.
I love that. I think that is really what it does. We were just talking before we hit record about our energy for the day. And one of the questions and the part of choosing the flow habit is self-reflection and noticing our own rhythms, which do change at midlife, our physical rhythms, right? And how we feel, because we're choosing when would be the ideal time not just in our schedule to do a 5 to 10 minute activity, but when would it be the most nourishing and when would it fit with our energy? And even that self-reflection and self-awareness has great power and is really healing. Like it's a way we can take our power back and create a new structure in a real gentle way. There's something in the book that is called the safer flow cycle. And I really wanted to mention that because I think that at midlife, this really speaks to finding our rhythm. And Herbert Benson was a Harvard cardiologist who uncovered something called the breakout principle. And what it was is that just pretty much the natural flow of life that we go through these cycles. We go through these cycles as we're doing activities. We go through these cycles in our life. And it starts with struggle. And then there's the release. And then there's a peak experience like flow or a heightened emotional state, or if we have a breakthrough of some, like a creative breakthrough. And then we need to rest and incorporate whatever just happened into our new normal. This is what he noticed when he was studying, doing his research. And this has since been identified as the flow cycle. But as I was doing my research and reading all these peer-reviewed studies as I was writing the book, I think like a coach. And also, I'm always trying to help people and figure out how I can use all this research in my own life as well. And I recognize that a lot of us get stuck in struggle, right? Struggle can become the new normal, especially when we're judging the struggle. We're judging other people for being in the situation we're in, or we're blaming ourselves that we're doing something wrong and that's why we're struggling. And so I was like, to get to that release where we then enter into an altered state or something shifts in our life where we feel positive again. Sometimes that's not so easy. And sometimes we can feel like we go through years where we're in this struggling phase because of all of these external events. And I thought, what can we do? How can we support ourselves to go from struggle into a release stage? And I realized from my work with clients that it's really about acceptance. And so I came up with this new acronym for the stages that I think is really powerful. And that is, when we're in that struggle, the next stage is accept. If we can just take a minute and sit with whatever we're feeling, whether it's sadness or frustration or anger or even stuckness, and sort of give ourselves the message that this is natural on some level, like anybody who would be in our situation in that moment. For example, me, sitting in my chair, my kids coming to me during lockdown, asking me a question. I'm not my best self. And a lot of times we just want to get away from that stuck feeling, And I think that if we can even just for a beat, normalize it and be like, you know what, right now, all around the world, there are millions of other women right in this moment having an experience like this. Whether it's their kid coming up to them or whether it's a boss, they're in a situation where they know this feeling, like I am not alone. This is a normal biological feeling. And if we can just think that thought just for a beat, that gives us ground again. And then the next in the acronym, I call it find a way. I use the word floativate in the book also, which is an F, which is finding something that we do that's unique to us, that is a way that we can make whatever's happening, give it meaning or make it fun, finding our own unique way to flow. And then the E, I call it the safer flow cycle because the E is enjoying the moment. So even if we don't experience a flow state, flow is one of many peak experiences. And the key is to just enjoy the moment. And we can do that so many ways, through gratitude, through finding a way to get immersed in what we're doing, which is what I did with writing. But we can experience flow moments every moment of our lives when we understand this model, and when we come to accept that we're all going to have these stressful moments. And then the R is for rest. So often our struggle, which is kind of what we were talking about before we hit record, sometimes we just haven't rested long enough. We just haven't given ourselves enough time to rest. And I love what Herbert Benson says, and to incorporate and integrate our new normal. and realize like we're evolving, we're changing, and some of those changes we don't like so much because they have physical symptoms that go with them during menopause. And but at the end of the day, we're really just trying to find our new normal. And I think that new normal can be one of, hope and excitement and passion and reclaiming our power when we do it in a way that works for us. And when those, little moments are focused on the unique things that bring us joy.
You were talking about that acronym, but those aren't the 4 steps, right? There's
Right.
a feel positive flow framework and there's 4 steps to that. Can you
Yes.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and just to put it in perspective, where they fall, the F, when I said find a way to flow, that's where the 4 steps come in. And they actually, interestingly, start with an F2. The acronym is FEEL. As I was looking at the research, there's so many different conditions that the researchers say exist with flow. And one of them is like timelessness, like we lose track of time. And another is having clear goals. And as I was looking at this, I thought these are all in the same pot. But for me, losing track of time feels like it kind of happens to me. And having clear goals is something I can control. So I was just playing with these all over my kitchen counter and had little slips of paper with all the words, the benefits of flow, things that seem like they just happen when we're in flow state. And I was like, well, what are the steps that we can take? And what I realized is there were 4 clear winners, and they spelled this acronym FEEL, and the benefits spelled the acronym positive, which I love that because I think the number one benefit of flow is that it helps us feel positive. And also I love the acronym FEEL for the 4 steps because we're so often we're just thinkers, right? And we're rewarded for thinking our way through, but it's helpful to remember that we find our way to flow by feeling our way and connecting with our intuitive selves. And the F is focus. So to start with, the first step of getting into flow, to inviting flow in our lives or to inviting a flow state starts with focus. And the question that can help us focus is simply, what is my top priority in this moment? And I find just by asking that question, I feel a shift inside. So it's like, helps us, if we're just overwhelmed or we have a lot on our to-do list, or even when we're about to sit down with our flow activity, just asking, what's my top priority in this moment? Then the second letter is E, and that's engage. And the question for engage is, what would make this more fun or meaningful for me? So that's so much is out there about flow when it comes to performance and how flow can help boost our performance and help us achieve more. But what has gotten lost is that flow is linked to intrinsic motivation. So it's all about you wanting to do what you're doing, or if you don't want to do it, you figuring out a way to do it on your own terms that works for you so that you make it fun and meaningful. And then the second E in the feel is equalize. And I chose this word from my days as a scuba diver, where we have to equalize our airways when you're going down and up as scuba diving with the outer pressure and our inner pressure. And we have to take our time and really tune in to how quickly we should go down and up based on the outer pressure and our own inner pressure. And flow is really about challenging ourselves and pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone just enough. And it's really not, we're so driven that we're so used to pushing ourselves and expecting so much of ourselves. So the question for that is, do I need to lighten up? Am I being too hard on myself? Am I expecting too much of myself? Or do I need to put a little bit more pressure on myself? Do I need to challenge myself to, hey, stay with it for 5 minutes, like set the timer and really stay with it? I mean, it can be, the answers to these questions can show up in so many different ways. But so that's the third. So we've done focus, we've done engage, we've done equalize, and then the last is L, which is listen and let go. And this is very much, this is sort of a simultaneous letting go. It's like we just let the activity take over. We just let ourselves be led. And so the listening happens in the letting go because we're not just letting go and checking out. And this is like the surprise of flow. It's like we're letting ourselves be led So if we let go, it's sort of letting go with a state of hopefulness that like something really good could come out of this, and I don't even know what it could be. So let me just follow where I'm feeling led in the moment. So that's the FEEL acronym.
The letting go part is very difficult, well, especially for me, but I think for a lot of women, because you always feel that need to control what is happening around you to make sure that everything goes the way it should. But I agree with what you're saying, that letting go and really leaning into that experience.
And I like, so this is again back to what the flow mindset is. And I like to remind people that this is all inside of us. Like we were kids. We remember, we have the muscle memory and the mind memory of what it feels like to let go. So this isn't something we have to work hard at learning to let go, because I agree. I have a hard time with it as well. So it's so helpful to remember we're not trying to learn something we don't know. We can lean back into who we already are. Just if we just approach this like a little kid and remember that little kid is still in us, that sometimes helps me get over that and just play
Yes,
little
yes.
games with ourselves.
Well, you talked about Jill Bolte Taylor. Early last year, I was able to have her on the show, and I have to say that her book and the four characters, which you mentioned in your book,
Yes.
really stuck with me. And it was probably one of the first times that I was talking to someone where I thought I could start crying. She had those four different characters, and sometimes I think I lived personally from the little girl character too much
Little
and
Abby,
didn't let.
yeah.
Yes,
Her
yes,
little
yes.
Abby. She encourages us to come up with our
Mhm.
own names for them. Yeah.
You really seem to connect with her and her message. Um, do you have four characters?
I haven't named them the way she has, but what I
Yes.
love about her, so I did a lot of research on purpose, and I really wanted to present multiple perspectives on how flow works in the brain, but also on our parts and our different personalities, and the different sides of ourselves. And what I absolutely love about her research is that the characters that she designates at the right side of the brain, which is what has over time been known as the creative side, although some experts say that's oversimplifying it. But that hasn't gotten much focus in the flow research, and I think primarily because we can experience flow doing so many different things that if we can get into flow, doing math equations, and that might activate the left side of the brain, and it can be very complicated. But what I loved about her descriptions was it was so clear from her descriptions of the characters that she associates with the right side of the brain. I mean, she uses the word flow so many times. So I definitely, and what I love about that is she reminds us that this is all inside of us already. And something I repeat over and over again in the book is that you're already a flow expert. The book is designed as a guide to help you when we make conscious what we are already doing unconsciously. That's when we have the power to change our lives. We're all the getting into flow all the time, and sometimes we're doing it scrolling, doing activities, scrolling on our phones, and our brain just wants to experience that high of flow and that flowing self that she does such a good job describing in her characters. Then we can pivot and be like, oh, okay. It's like when we crave sweets, and we reach for the candy, but we can say, okay, maybe my sugar just dropped and I do need to raise my blood sugar, but maybe there's another way, and we can start to work with our own tendencies and desires and preferences. But yeah, what an honor and a treat that you got a chance to have a conversation with her. I love her book.
There was one more thing that was in your book that really stuck with me. You said something like, when we're in the flow state, the volume of that inner critic turns way down. I just feel like so often we have that little voice in our head that's telling us it's too late, or we're too old, or we missed our opportunity. What does flow help us do that kind of quiets that little inner voice?
Yeah, I mean, when they look at images of the brain of people in flow, the default mode network or the prefrontal cortex, one of the two, or sometimes both, depending on different studies, go offline. And those are the parts of the brain that rule that voice. So the key is getting past that voice or starting to quiet that voice to access flow. Because when we're really in a flow state, we don't feel as self-conscious, like that we're disengaged from that part of ourselves. But if we notice, like if you've been in flow, sometimes I hear it and it like the little voice starts again, or I'm drawing. It's like, oh, that's not good. And I'll be like, okay, listen and let go, listen and let go, not listen to the inner critic. So it's a dance, it's a process. It's not like it's all or nothing. There's something called the circular effect of flow, which is that we can give ourselves a small dose of the benefits that we get from flow. And in doing that, we often start to quiet this inner critic. And we might not be in the flow state yet, but that's how we get in. And it could be different for each of us. That's what I love about experimenting and seeing what works for us, and just knowing that it's like a small dose of the how flow feels, even imagining how we might feel and faking it until we make it, or meditating right before we do an activity to calm our nervous system, to calm that voice. So we might still hear the inner critic, but it might be a little quieter. Part of this journey for me, and studying and teaching and leading people to uncovering their own unique formula for flow, has been really healing for me, because I've been playing around with that too, and like all the different ways to work with my inner critic. And really showing up, being willing to do what we're doing imperfectly. That's what works for me the most. I have to do that in such small doses. I told the story of how I started doing the 28-day flow challenges in the beginning. Like, first it was telling my family, right? First it wasn't telling anybody, because I thought I would look silly. Then it was telling my family. Then it was just telling my very closest friends, because that I knew wouldn't judge me, because they had this creative side to them too. And then one of the scariest things was going out on Facebook and being like, I put like I would do a question of the day and a word of the day, and I would handwrite it and take a picture of it in nature or whatever as one of my flow activities. And I'd be like, I'm doing this thing, a 28-day flow challenge, choose a 5 to 10-minute activity, and being like, oh, I'm so glad we're in lockdown that I don't have to see these people in the grocery store. I don't, because the inner critic also takes on an outer critic that's like a gremlin in our brain, right? Like, that is like all the people that have ever judged us, and what will they be saying, and that judging me. And then to find out like people showed up that I never would have expected from different parts of my life, who really got it, or sent me links to new studies, or joined in and had these amazing life-changing experiences. And if I hadn't had the courage to share really from an authentic place, that those connections, I just did my big book launch in the East Coast, and some of the people in that room were from like my first job, at Johnson and Johnson, and she was one of the first people on Facebook that was like, "Oh man," and I hadn't heard from her, and so that's the benefit we get when we're willing to show up and be vulnerable and be imperfect and look silly, a few minutes at a time, and that's really what gets us flowing again, right? And helps us to find each other, and help us to find other women who are on similar journeys, is just, being willing to do it. And it's like in baby steps and little moments, whatever is that just right amount of stepping out of our comfort zone, so that we don't feel so vulnerable that our inner critic is just running the show and we want to, hide in a cave. But we are pushing ourselves so that we get that juice back again for life, and for what might happen when we put ourselves out there and stretch.
We don't realize that there are more women that feel the same way we do. And like you just mentioned, as soon as you put yourself out there and you do take that little baby step, there's somebody else ready to grab your hand and say, yeah, I'm in there with you too. I get it.
Yeah. So I ended up putting this on Instagram then, and got people from all over the world. There were women participating during the pandemic from India and from Africa. And on my Zoom calls, I would be like so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I had 2 people from Uganda and 1 person from Kenya. And the thing is, that's what I love so much about flow. Because if you ask people, have you ever had that feeling where you've been so into doing something that you lost track of time? And you see that sparkle in their eyes. And then they tell you a story of when they were little and, they were making daisy chains in the field on a vacation, or they were coloring with crayons and they loved that coloring book and they loved the way it felt. Or they went dancing with their partner on one of the first dates and they just remember twirling around. And suddenly we might look so different on the outside. And we're connecting on such a deep, rich, authentic, vulnerable, soulful level. And that's what it means to be human. Like, that's what it means to be alive. The book starts with a near-death experience. And I think when we go through midlife, we start to think about our own mortality, and we start to think about aging and all those things. And when we're able to connect with these moments, when we have this experience, and we see that sparkle in somebody's eyes that we're like, they couldn't be more different than us. And I might have thought I had nothing in common with this person, and we have this in common. And this is what makes life worthwhile. And this is what makes every day so amazing, that we could have a moment like this in it, as well as all the pain and all the struggle and all the hard work and all the worries. But this is also what it means to be human, and I think on many levels, I think that's the wisdom that we bring in midlife as women, having that yearning and that hunger to make our days filled with meaning and joy and connection. I love that I wrote a book and I love that I'm coaching and speaking, but for me, it's this connection. Like, I'm so jazzed up about this message because I love hearing those stories after I do the talk at the bookstore and someone comes up to me and they're like, I got my art supplies out again. And they feel uplifted and happy and they have something to look forward to and playful again. And I'm like, that's it. Like, that's what it means to be human. That's this crazy ride that we're all on, right? It's not all that noise of the inner critic that wants us to stay small. It's this. We can have big moments, even though they're only a few minutes.
For that woman, what's that first step that you want her to take? She wants to quiet the inner critic. She wants to feel more at peace and more joy and more alive in her life. What do you want her to do?
The first thing is to just get really quiet and just think for a moment, like, what would that thing be? And if sometimes people just know, they might not even want to admit, but they just, something pops into their mind. And on my website and my book, there's so many examples of all kinds of crazy ideas, of swinging on a swing, or, all kinds of, so for inspiration. But also I in my workshops, I lead a meditation where I invite people to go back in time, and their intuition kind of leads them to that just right moment of a time when they were just happier than ever before. But it's like, we're not looking for a big moment like, your wedding day or all the usual. We're looking for like a split second in time when you were so happy. And so it's really helpful to do it in a meditation because, you quiet the inner critic and calm the inner critic. But we can do that just brainstorming and thinking, or talking with a friend about those moments. I had a friend that was like so busy and overworked and tired, and she was like, I can't think of any activity. Like, I don't have anything like that in my life. I don't have a hobby. And then we were talking and we're like, remember at that New Year's party when we were blasting 80s music and you were just dancing and, you had a couple drinks and you were having so much fun. We were like, that's it. Like, just play one of those songs a day. Like, at some point in your car, maybe on your way to your job, she has multiple jobs, and just like dance in your car on the way. So you're multitasking, or in the morning. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but we all do have something. And a lot of times music is a great floativator, what I call, but there's a lot of research about the connection between music and flow. So let yourself be wrong. Like, choose something and let it be wrong and just try it for one day. And then if it doesn't work, no big deal. Just try something else, That's what I would recommend, is just play around with it. And if 5 minutes feels too long, then just do it for 1 minute. So it's just letting go, letting yourself experiment, letting yourself be asking that question, like, what's the most important thing in this moment? For 30 seconds, I can just feel the sun on my face as I walk and just say, that's the most important thing. For 20 seconds, just to feel the spring sunlight, that it just broke through the clouds for a second, and just get into that habit of just doing that first step in the 4 steps. And that's how we train our brains to start to get ready for flow. My 3 activities are the writing, and then I have in the book about my doodling, but I used to doodle when I would listen to my professors in college, and I have this whole system of how I doodle, and no lines can cross, and I have to keep moving my pen, and I have this whole game I play with myself, and I had forgotten that I even did that. And then I chose doodling as an activity. I come from a family of very, very good artists, and I didn't happen to get the art gene, so I was like, doodling something. I don't care if people think I'm a good doodler, or my inner critic really doesn't get involved with my doodling, whether it's good or bad artwork. So I doodled, and I realized, wow, I get into flow so easily doodling. And I think that's why, because I have no judgment about it. So now I doodle before I write, because I just drop right in. And then my other one, I was going to say I have 3. So it's doodling, writing, and dancing. I dance in my kitchen, and I dance in my pajamas, and I blast the music through the house. And it's a great workout, first of all, if you haven't worked out that day. And also it just changes our mood, right? Yeah.
Well,
So it's
and that's what we're looking for. We're just looking for something that's going to impact our day in a way that gets us out of our own way.
Yes. And reconnecting with that spark, like our
Yeah.
best self. Like that's what this is all about. Like those moments when we feel stuck, or that's how I started. I felt separated from my best self, from who I really was, like my gifts, those gifts I have to offer other people and my kids, and how I want to show up, right? And that's really the key. Like that's what flow is all about. Like turning down that inner critic, turning down those external voices for a moment, giving ourselves a break of needing to be looking a certain way or acting a certain way, or having achieved, or valuing our, judging our how well we've done in our life based on exterior things, and just giving ourselves a break from all of that, for a minute, just to be with who we are, just to be with that spark, that part of us that has been with us since the minute we were born, when our bodies look very different, and it will be with us the minute we are dead. Like there's something in there, there's that glimmery, light, sparkly version of us that's us. And just being with ourselves changes how we show up in the world.
If we want to learn more about the flow habit, the book, and what you're doing, where's the best place for anybody watching to connect with you?
I have my own website, which has all the information. It has all my social media links on there. I have a podcast that's called The Flow Habit. So the book is called The Flow Habit, and it's available at any bookseller or on Amazon. My podcast is called The Flow Habit, and my website is lauriesmith.com, which is LAURIE, my name, SMITH.com. But theflowhabit.com will take you there too. So it's really easy to find me. And my 28-day flow challenge, when I started offering these, people had such positive experiences that I swore that I would always offer my 28-day flow challenges for free. So now they're, you can sign up on my website. You can check self-guided flow challenge. If you sign up for my newsletter, there's a little checkbox, and you'll get 1 email a day for 28 days, which includes the word of the day and the question of the day and stories. And that some people don't like to get emails every day, and that's okay. You can still do this on your own without doing that, but that's always available as well if people are interested.
Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time and being here today and sharing such a positive message. I can't wait to share your book with more people, and to just take some moments out of every day to make sure that I'm enjoying every minute that I can.
That's all we can do, right? And if you choose a flow habit, I would love to hear how it goes and what you're doing, because it's so fun to do this together.
Absolutely. Again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Real Insights. If you want to hear more about how other women navigate feeling stuck in midlife and menopause, order your copy of Empart, Real Stories, Real Wisdom, Real Menopause on Amazon today. And don't forget to join the conversation at joinempart.com. Until next time, remember that midlife is a journey, but you're not alone.